All right, so we are now going to turn from really, it still kind of deals with some of the things that are going on in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. Kind of builds on that. There's actually only 2 sections in this module, which works out great. We'll do one today, we'll do one on Thursday, and then we'll take our quiz on Friday. But it's not a whole lot of material, so it should be easy to study. So, without further ado, we're going to kind of get into old values versus new values. So, really, we're going to look at 3 big picture things as it comes to how the values of Americans have changed over time. The first one is going to be nativism and how we go about restricting immigration. So, a couple things you need to take note of here. Since the 1880s, basically, immigrants have flocked to the U.S. in huge numbers. All right, and critics of what was thought of as basically open integration or immigration basically kind of claim that America's racial stock is going to be overrun by these undesirables coming from Asia and Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. And really, it was based on ethnicity. And so they're looking at, Asian people, and they're like, oh, our good genetic stock is going to be overrun by immigrants, which is super duper racist. And so, there's other sort of special interest groups there. Fundamentalist Protestants, as we had talked about the fundamentalists, they are also worried about an increased number of Jews and Catholics coming in. And they are very worried that Judaism and Catholicism are going to kind of take over small town Protestant churches. And again, really racist and terrible. Now, Southern Europeans are largely Catholics, particularly like Italy, right? That's kind of what we're talking about, Italy. Some of these areas, very Catholic there, and they're coming in, and labor leaders of the time in the United States are thinking, oh, this is going to lower our wages. These immigrants, they're so poor, they're going to come work for nothing, and then they're going to take all the good paying jobs and all this stuff. So again, it's this idea that, the American dream is for us, not for you, right? Which is kind of funny because most of these people that are saying this are also immigrants like 30 years before, right? So they immigrate and they get what they want, and then they go, nobody else can immigrate. They're taking our jobs. It's like, bro, you took somebody's job when you got here too, right? And so there's a lot of this going on. Overall, Congress does slowly build kind of these legal walls that's going to restrict immigration through a couple of acts in the 1910s and 1920s. The first thing is that in 1917, they passed a literacy test required for immigrants, okay? Now, it doesn't work very well because they had hoped that, this idea that these immigrants are stupid and they're low class and all that, and then they get there and they're like, all right, you immigrant, gotta read. And they're like, okay, we can read. The literacy rate in Europe was far higher than in the United States. So they were like, cool, we can read. That's not a problem. And they were like, dang it, I thought we'd get them immigrants for sure. Because that's my old white racist guy voice. Anyways, you still had about 1.25 million people enter the country that year. So it proved to be rather ineffective, and we should tell you something. Again, immigrants, they're actually literate and somewhat educated. And so it doesn't fit into that racist rhetoric that, people are saying, we should limit immigrants because they can't even read. And they're like, we can read. And they're like, dang it, how else should we limit them immigrants? And so now we're going to put, in 1921, they're going to put a cap on immigration. So they're basically going to say, we're only going to let so many of you immigrants in, and then no more immigrants. And then that does kind of work because obviously you're just going to say no more after this. But here's the problem. We still don't want those Southern Europeans and Jews and Catholics coming. So how do we put a cap on it and still get what we want, right? And so they really made an effort to incentivize the immigrant offices to only really accept people from what we call like old school immigrants, like from England and France and Spain, and like, oh, we really just want those immigrants. So there's a push there, and then we don't want them Chinese with their delicious food. But Chinese food is food. Chinese food is the best. What are you talking about? Cannon doesn't. I wouldn't let her touch my hair. Anyways, so then you have 1924, the National Origins Act, which basically said if you're from Northern and Western Europe, we like you. Asians, no Asians. What's up? I don't think that's true. All right, so again, the critics, they want to, Asians are going to be banned, all this. Now, more emphatically racist, of course, is the KKK. Yeah, let's just, by 1915, the KKK was basically dead. And the reason for that is not because people were like, the KKK is wrong. Clearly, once you really establish like Jim Crow laws in the South, and it is now systemically, institutionally racism, like you don't need the KKK anymore. The KKK was really around to like enforce the black codes that were kind of unwritten laws. Now we can just put racist laws on the book, and the KKK was not really needed. And so the KKK was just about dead. And then, all the immigrants. And so they really reemerge in the 1920s. A guy named William Simmons. Y'all good? He's a school teacher, actually. And, he summons a gathering at Stone Mountain on Thanksgiving Day in Georgia as the sun sets, and it's outside of Atlanta. And he has like 5,000 members by 1920, okay? And a couple prominent members, they start to raise money. They start selling merchandise, and this is kind of where the Klan then quickly falls back out of favor because these people were like, hey, this whole Klan thing, this is great. Now, you do need to understand, like, there has been quite a bit of scholarship about the Klan in recent years. And I want to preface this by saying Klan sucks. They're bad people. They're wrong. But I need you to understand something very important. During the 1920s and 1930s, part of being a middle-class member of society meant that you joined like social orders and social clubs and stuff. Like the Masonic Lodge was very big, if you know about the Masons. Like that was a very big thing. You had these men's social clubs. And you end up like by 1925 with like 5 million people in the Klan. Like all men, 5 million of them. Okay? And it's kind of crazy. You're like, how can such a racist organization, how can it get to a point in society where so many people are just racist like that? Well, you do just have to understand that like a lot of people that joined the Klan, especially like in the North, where the Klan was very popular in the North, where there was not very many black people. And again, this is kind of controversial because the scholarship on it, people who write about aspects of like, in some areas in the North, more white people got beat up by the Ku Klux Klan because part of being in the Klan in the 1920s was this idea of like manliness and taking care of your family and not drinking in public. Remember, they're fundamentalist Christians. And so fundamentalist Christians are those ultra conservatives, like your wife should be at home cooking and cleaning, and you shouldn't be out drinking in public, and you should pay your bills, and if you shouldn't be out gambling. And like if you were a member of the Ku Klux Klan and you were out getting drunk in public, the other members of your chapter would come and beat you up. Like it was more, in a lot of ways in some places. Now in the South, clearly terrorist organization. In the North, but how do you end up with people in the North who have not had these Jim Crow laws, who work with black people, and they're not like friendly, and racism is certainly still exists. How do you end up with all these people buying into joining a terrorist organization that are just like go to church every Sunday, might even work with black people, but have never wanted to harm a black person, like not really no more than they want to harm anybody else? How do those people end up in the Klan? And I think that there is some nuance to that you need to understand, that the KKK of the 1920s is not the same as the KKK of the 1870s. And it's also not the same in certain places as the KKK of the 1960s, right? There's like waves of this. Now, the one in the 20s got a little crazy because there was a group, these members, Elizabeth Tyler and Edward Clark. They decide that this is a good way to make money. And so before the 1920s, the whole like white robes and stuff didn't exist. Like that wasn't a thing. But they were like, hey, we should make this more like a fraternal order. And they're going to make it more like the Masons, where you have all this regalia and you have the different uniforms, and you come up with this system of different names for the president and the vice president of each chapter, and they're going to like come up with pamphlets, and like they turned it literally into like a fraternity.
So it's a fraternity on drugs.
What? I don't think they were allowed to do drugs.
No, like it's like a fraternity.
Yeah. And so basically they are the ones that come up with the idea of the hoods and the robes and all this stuff, imperial wizard, and they're kind of losers. Like if you ever like really look at like, not like for the purpose of joining, don't look for purposes of joining, but if you look at like investigating ideas and how the Klan is set up, it's really embarrassing. Like Grand Wizard and Imperial, like it's like a D&D session going to a dadgum KKK meeting. It's embarrassing. Like it's kind of like loserish to some extent. And it's because these two people found out that like, we can make money off of this. If you have to pay these dues and then you have to buy these robes, or you're not part of it, and we're the only people that sell the robes, then basically we can get rich. And then that ends up being very, there was like this huge crazy march down the streets of Washington, D.C. Millions. Like, it's not clandestine or a secret society, right? These people are like, they think that they're patriotic and nationalistic. Like, they think they're promoting American idealism. Hey. But that goes far beyond the older Klans, they're trying to reconfigure, KKK for America. Like, get out of here, bro. Like, you're crazy. But millions of people bought into it. Because, again, not everybody bought into... Yeah. You didn't have to buy into... Maybe you didn't hate black people, but you hated this idea of teaching evolution. The KKK said, hey, if there's a school teacher out there teaching evolution and poisoning the brains of our kids, instead of teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ creating us by his hand, and they're out there teaching that we came from monkeys, and we're going to go kick the crap out of that guy. And people were like, well, I don't hate black people, but I don't like that guy teaching evolution either. And these guys say they're not going to let him. I'm on their side. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I don't think women should be out there smoking and drinking and acting a fool and talking about their sexuality. We should have strong men in those families that are taking care of their wives and daughters and providing for them so they don't have to go to work. I don't agree with beating up black people, but I do agree with this. I'll join them, right? I don't agree with everything in either political party of today, right? Most people don't. If you took the whole list of things that they stand for, most people are not all like, oh yeah, I'm on every single one of these. Good to go, right? But it's easy to get roped into some of these ideas that you're like, I agree with like a good portion of this, but not that other stuff. So I'm going to join the organization, and I'm just not going to partake in that other stuff. And it's easy to get wrapped up in some of that stuff, like I said. And you have to understand that, like, yes, there is racism involved in this. Yes, there is anti-immigration involved in this. There is all of that. Black people weren't exactly for immigrants either. Okay? Anti-immigrant was everybody who worked a low-paying job in America. Mostly that's what black people had. Guess what? They don't want some Italian guy coming in and taking their job either. Okay? So it's not like you just have a bunch of white people that don't want immigrants. It's everybody that's working low-paying job thinking I'm going to get the food's going to be taken out of my family's mouth. And so a lot of these ideas are widespread. And I think that that's the most important thing to really understand here. Widespread nativism. More than just racism as black and white, but it's nativism. It's ethnic. It's keeping certain ethnicities out. Again, they appealed to not just anti-black, anti-Jewish, anti-Catholic, anti-immigrant, anti-women's suffrage, anti-bootleggers. Oh yeah, if you were for prohibition, the KKK was for prohibition. Interestingly enough, the KKK in the South in particular had a very strong influence on the Baptist church, Baptist and Methodist churches. But the Baptist church, even today, has a prohibition of alcohol. And that came from the KKK. So you go ahead and just think what you want about that. But that's how Baptists really got involved with the whole, preachers and a real Baptist, Southern Baptist shouldn't be drinking. That's from the KKK. Because the KKK was for prohibition. So then all the pastors were. So, yeah. Support remains strong, and then you get corruption. Then you have the Back to Africa movement. A guy named Marcus Garvey, he believed African Americans would never achieve equality in the United States. He believed that only in Africa, a nation that offered equality to black people could exist, and he formed the United Negro Improvement Association. They pretty quickly get 80,000 followers, and it's funny because on my notes, you type in Negro and it puts it in stars, which is weird because that's the name of the organization. It censored it. Yeah. So anyways, then he follows up and he starts the Black Star Line steamship company. And his idea is that we're going to actually load black people up and take them back to Africa. And then he gets convicted of mail fraud. So, yeah, and they send him to Jamaica. And he never finalizes this grand adventure back to Africa for anybody. But these problems are everywhere, not just on the surface. They are very deeply rooted. Finally, to show the intolerance in a different way, you can relate here. You have two self-proclaimed anarchists and atheists, Sacco and Vanzetti. They are arrested in 1927 for a double murder in Massachusetts that took place all the way back in 1920. And the trial goes very quickly. It becomes about their beliefs and not about the evidence. People are like, these two immigrants, they don't believe in Jesus. They don't believe in government. And then they're like, and they killed those girls. And they're like, well, what's the evidence that they killed them? Well, they're heathens. They don't even believe in Jesus. Well, they must be murderers too. And they killed them. They killed them. Yeah. Sacco and Vanzetti. people were so worried about these ideas coming from outside of the United States that you literally have anti-immigrant sentiment just killing folks. So there you go.